How's it going, everybody? This is Dave Meltzer. We're going to be here for the next 2 hours talking pro wrestling. We've got Brian Alvarez here, and we're going to have Bruno Sammartino up in about a half an hour. So we'll be talking with probably the biggest star in American wrestling during the 60s and 70s and one of the biggest names in the history of this industry. And he was our guest not all that long ago, and very fascinating show. So we're really looking forward to having him back. Very impressed by his memory. He recited this Cow Palace card from like 1961. He had the top 3 or 4 matches just, boom, right off the top of his head. And I couldn't even remember the top matches on the last TV show I watched. Anyway, so much for that. Brian, how are you today?
I'm doing good.
That's good. How did the issue turn out?
Well, the plan to have the issue done very early fell through. It was not done until about 1:30, but it turned out doing pretty good, so I think it's probably like one of the longest newsletters that I've ever written in my life. But I had this thing on the program where you can squeeze the lines together to fit more into the newsletter, so I managed to not have to cut anything out, but it's really long.
I cut a lot out last night. You know what's so funny is, I kept thinking, like after we got past WrestleMania, because there's only one promotion in the United States, that I would actually have trouble filling issues. And that has not been the case at all. I mean, I cut, I had an ECW story that I will run next week. And I didn't even get into the business rundown for the month. So I'm going to have to do that one in this coming issue as well. Long story on WCW, on the relaunch of WCW, lots of details and the Memphis stories that, those things. And plus there's still a lot of stuff going on. It's not that slow. I mean, so it seems slow, but it's not at all. Especially last night with the pay-per-view actually today. And SmackDown today. Well, I guess I
had the opportunity to cut out the Heat review, but then I thought to myself, you spent an hour thinking of various ways to make fun of Michael Cole, and I can't cut it out. There's no way.
I didn't even have room. I started watching last night. Kind of during breaks, I was watching a little bit. I guess of the Galavision. I saw just little bits, but I didn't sit there and take notes or anything like that. But I guess the Charlie Manson thing was on the show last night because I got an email about it. Actually, a couple of emails about it that said it was the sickest thing they ever saw. Said it was equal to the Sid Vicious leg break. So you're getting a tape of that, aren't you?
Yeah, I'll get a tape tonight.
And I'm going to be getting a tape probably tomorrow of that match on Saturday, the one with Jun Kasai, where he became the Human Shredder. So we will have some very sick things to look forward to on tape in the next couple of days. I watched the first 2 matches of the EML pay-per-view, and they were fun matches. I'm going to try to watch that tonight, the rest of the show. But anyway, so much for that. Well, by the way, later in the show, get a pen and paper out, because later in the show, we will give you the addresses for Observer and Figure 4, since we never do that on the show, and I've gotten requests to do that, so we'll do it tonight, later on. During the break, I don't know, like the one in, like an hour and 20 minutes from now, or an hour and 10 minutes, that break, when we talk about the website and all that other stuff. Anyway, we'll talk about SmackDown last night. Let's see, they had a lot of the Ohio Valley guys were there again. Rico Constantino, Randy Orton. They also had Scott Vick and Steve Bradley. Brock Lesnar, Shelton Benjamin. All worked, and people are raving about old Shelton Benjamin, let me tell you. By the way, he will be on the show. Let me get this date. He will be on a week from Thursday. So,
did we ever find out what happened to Ken Shamrock?
No. I mean, I just figured that since it's been 3 no-shows, I think that he just... it's funny because, like, the first one, I just figured that, it was after the Fujita fight, and I just figured, he did not want to talk about the Fujita fight with me. But that's months ago. That was like September. Now we're in May. And several weeks ago, his father called me up and goes, Ken wants to do your show. I go, cool. So we booked a date, and then he canceled, and then we booked a second date. And then he canceled. And then we booked a third date. And I don't even know what happened because he didn't even cancel yesterday. So I just think that...
we should do a deal where we say we're having a tournament of former guests. Then there's no way you could no-show.
I don't get that.
He's got that reputation. You can never finish a tournament.
Okay, how does he not no-show? I don't get it, though.
Well, he'd have to.
Okay. I still don't get it, but... Anyway, we got to... before we get into that, the Backlash pay-per-view... here's the situation. The top matches, it's going to be Undertaker and Kane, who are the tag team champions now. All 4 belts are at stake against Austin and Triple H. So, but basically, if Undertaker and Kane lose, then Austin and Triple H add the tag team titles. They did this once with Diesel and Shawn against, wasn't Owen Hart and British Bulldog, where Diesel and Shawn won the tag team titles, and they'd already held, like, the Intercontinental in the world. And then I think they split up as a tag team.
Didn't they vacate him, like, the next night or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, it was really bogus. You know, it was another one of those issues where Shawn Michaels didn't drop a title in the ring. So I guess that means that Hunter and Austin are going to win? No, but they can't because the next
they could do? I think there's either two ways to do it. They either have Hunter and Austin win, so they have all the belts, or they just do the deal where Kane pins Hunter, wins the Intercontinental belt, and then there's your feud right there. So Hunter would be challenging.
Could be. They could do it that way. I had thought
I don't think Undertaker's winning that world title. Or Kane. There's no way.
Don't say there's no way, but
I'm saying there's no way.
That means that they may prove you wrong. But I don't know. I think that putting the world title on Undertaker, that'd be a big mistake. But anyway, they did that one once before. So anyway, that's it. They're going to have Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle basically doing a combination. The way this program was originally supposed to be, as of let's see, the booking meeting was Tuesday morning. So as of Monday, was that they were going to do the tag team match in this pay-per-view. And then they were going to go to singles with Benoit and Angle, where they were going to do a submission match and then follow it up with an Iron Man match. Well, instead they've canceled the tag team after all this time of building it up on TV, and they're doing the Iron Man submission match, so it's 30 minutes, and you can only win your falls on a submission. There's no pinfalls. So they are going to get a chance to do a lot of submissions.
So in other words, we could have had 3 pay-per-views worth of Kurt Angle versus Chris Benoit. And now it's going to be 1.
No, we still may get 3. It's just that we're getting they're just going to do different matches. 30 minutes submission only. You know, I mean, that takes away the Olympic slam. That takes away the diving headbutt. It takes away a lot of false finishes. I mean, it takes away every false, we're going to get a lot of submissions and rope breaks. And I guess it depends on how well, for 30 minutes, the crowd in Chicago will buy it. Chicago is a good crowd. In fact, it's one of the best crowds in the country. So, maybe a hell of a match. Of course.
One of the things that I liked that they did on SmackDown was the deal where Kurt Angle comes out and he has his lackeys come out and he basically submits them with the ankle lock, a choke, and I think one other thing, an armbar or something like that.
Armbar.
Yeah. So anyway, at least they're getting over like a whole bunch of different submissions as opposed to the last submission match. Which, what was it, like Jericho and, what was it, Benoit and Rock. That's right, Benoit and Rock. And they really only teased one submission for each guy. So these guys would be on the mat trying things, and nobody would care because in the back of their minds, everyone's thinking, okay, Benoit's only going to win with the crossface, and Rock is only going to win with that sharpshooter or whatever. So I like the fact that they're trying to get over the fact that any submission can put a guy out.
Yeah. Well, I think that's Paul Heyman booking. Because that's just the way he thinks. I don't know that, but pretty good idea. Let's see. So then Regal and Jericho are going to go in I think it's called a British Rules match, which I don't know what the stipulations of a British Rules match are. I'm guessing rounds, but I could be wrong on that. Then they're going to do Big Show and Shane McMahon, which we'll explain in just a second. Anyway, yeah, I know. Let's see. SmackDown opens with Regal coming out and basically yelling at Undertaker and Kane for getting in people's business like they did last night at the end of the show on Raw. And he orders a Kane Rhino match for the hardcore title. And basically Edge and Christian and Rhino all come out. And so do Austin and Triple H. And so Undertaker's brawling with Edge and Christian and Rhino. And then Hunter and Triple H are killing Kane with chair shots. And then Austin basically gets Rhino and throws him on top of Kane. And Rhino wins the hardcore title. Then it was the APA and Kai and Tai beating RTC, and Taka Michinoku actually pinned one of them. I think he pinned Bull Buchanan. So then, let's see. Undertaker asks where Regal's office is, and then when he's told, he tells the guy, oh, by the way, call 911. So later in the show, not much later.
She said call the fire department.
Yeah, well, they set his table on fire, and with Regal's table on fire, they demanded a match against Austin and Triple H. And Regal said that they could get the match, but only if they win the tag team titles in a no DQ match against Edge and Christian. And then right then, when I read that, it was like, it's all downhill from there. Because Edge and Christian against Undertaker and Kane are going to get killed, even with help from Hunter and Austin. Which, by the way, is what happened.
And by the way, if Vince ever says that we do not do arson on our telecasts, he's lying.
Yeah. Let's see. Shane showed up in the Nitromobile. And let's see. Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero beat Grandmaster Sexay to keep the European title. Let me see what else. So anyway, then the big thing with Vince calls out Shane and shows the footage of Shane talking to Big Show on Monday. By the way, Brian, before we get into that, you watched the tape of that interview unedited. What did he say? Or did he say anything? Or do you have any idea?
I have absolutely no idea what he said because I played it back like 10 times. I turned the volume all the way up on the computer, and you just cannot tell what he said. I mean, if you think in your mind that he said goof, you can hear it. But if you think in your mind that he said something else, you can hear that too. So I don't know what he said. I guess we'll find out when they air the footage on SmackDown. I mean, if they air that footage again, maybe
they'll do the same bleep, I think, unless they don't have to.
Unless it was obvious he said goof, and then that's why they're airing it, is because they want people to know that's what he said.
Well, I guess we'll find out on Thursday. So anyway, he accuses Shane of trying to steal the Big Show, but eventually he comes to his senses and goes, "You can take him. I don't care. He's a big flop anyway." And he actually basically says that. And then he tells Big Show, he's got to make a choice which side he's going with. So Big Show grabs his hand and starts to choke Vince, stops choking Vince, and then chokeslams Shane. And then Vince orders Big Show against Shane on Backlash. Then they have a tables match with the Dudleys against Jericho and Benoit, which, to me, if the whole idea is that Benoit and Jericho don't like each other, but they're teaming together for a common goal, which is the fact that they don't like Regal and Angle, then why would they be fighting the Dudleys, who they have no issue with, if they don't like each other? But anyway,
I think on Monday it was kind of clear that they kind of like each other now. I mean, they held each other's arms up and everything. It wasn't like, the last couple of times they made the save for each other, they just glared at each other and walked off. So, the angle there was they don't like each other, but, they respect each other enough that they'll help each other in this feud. Now it's like, well, we like each other now.
Okay, well, evidently so, because they wrestled the match. It's a tables match, and Angle pushes Benoit off the top ropes. Benoit goes through a table. Didn't go through very clean, but anyway, so the Dudleys won that match. Then, let me see what we had from there.
Isn't it strange how the tables match, the rules change? Like, sometimes you have to put both guys through, and then sometimes it's only putting one guy through.
Yeah, well, it's you're right. And then sometimes, who knows? Sometimes they'll do pinfalls in tables match someday too.
Yeah.
China beat Molly Holly. Heard that match was really bad because China sells nothing. Then they have the Angle Submission Clinic, which we talked about earlier. I think it's Doug Basham, Nick Dinsmore, and Ray Steele. Those were the three guys. And he basically submits all of them. And then Kurt Angle comes out, and not Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit comes out and puts Kurt Angle in the crossface. And Kurt Angle gave the crowd a BA when he was leaving, which is it's not a first in the WWF, because I've seen Shawn Michaels and Billy Gunn do it many times, but I bet it's the first time Kurt Angle has done it, at least since high school. And then Undertaker and Kane against Edge and Christian in an ODQ match. Austin and Triple H killed Kane, so Undertaker was left alone with Edge and Christian, and he killed both of them and pinned Christian with the last ride. And that was it. So
no Hardys.
No Hardys at all on the show. They may have an explanation on TV. Now, what did I
they're
hear?
Dead.
Yeah, the deal as far as what happened and why it happened with Hunter, as far as the what happened in that ring and Hunter not selling and all that, that is nobody's fault except for Hunter. And then because he worked out that match, so that can be blamed on him. Hunter winning cannot be blamed on Hunter because Vince McMahon booked the main event, and when he booked the main event, he wanted that all titles gimmick, so Hunter did have to win the title back. In fact, Hunter was never really even supposed to lose the title, but they decided, hey, let's just do it. But even when he lost it, I mean, it was one of those things where they even if they wanted to keep it going because of the way the pay-per-view had been laid out.
With the big guys?
With the big guys. The way the pay-per-view had been laid out, Hunter had to be Intercontinental Champion, plus for the England show he had to be Intercontinental Champion. So he had to regain it when he lost it. He never had to lose it. That was Vince's doctrine, yes, had to. That wasn't Hunter. That was Vince. So I mean, because he had the main event booked, and then they just had to get there. And they could get there any way they wanted. And how they got there, you can argue about. And even that is quite strange. Anyway. Let's see. What do we have for a poll here? For today, how do you feel about the Backlash main event of Undertaker and Kane versus Triple H and Austin? A, will order the show because I always order WF pay-per-view shows, which is actually where I would fit in. B, will order the show because I like the match. C, will order the show because all the belts are at stake. D, will not order the show because of that main event match. And E, don't watch WF pay-per-view. So that's the deal there. Let me get to the poll for yesterday, which is what did you think of Raw? 11% said excellent, 40% said good. I think that's I would be good, because if the main event had a different storyline to it, I would have actually said excellent, but I'd go with good. 33% said average, 10% said bad, 6% said awful. Let's see. Today,
it's the Hardys and their family.
What?
That's 6%.
Yeah. Let's see, the Budokan Hall today, 0-1 had their pay-per-view, which on paper looked like a terrible show, but in fact was a really good show from all the reports I got. Let's see, Tatsuhito Takaiwa beat Naomichi Marufuji, which I would have expected to be really good, and Marufuji looked really good, and anyway, heard that was a very good opener. Second was Naohiro Hoshikawa beat Mr. X, who turned out to be, the mystery man turned out to be George Takano under a mask, who was actually a really good worker in the mid-'80s, but now he's overweight. He's overweight, and he looked bad. Actually, I heard that the match had no heat, but was a decently worked match. Alexander Asuka beat
Takashi. You know, when you think of the mid-'80s, that's almost 20 years ago now.
Well, 1984, 17 years ago, was when the Cobra was at his peak, when he had the feud with Dynamite Kid and all those people for the... Was the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title? No, it was then, in those days, I think it was the WWF Junior Heavyweight title. IWGP didn't come till later. He was the guy who was the successor to Satoru Sayama, and unfortunately, he was the successor to Satoru Sayama because even though he was good, it was like death. You know, it's like you're put in this position. Satoru Sayama was like
the next Shawn Michaels, the next Ric Flair.
It's like the next Ric Flair, yeah, exactly. Pretty tough. Although I remember years ago, when Steve Austin was a rookie, everybody said he was going to be the next Ric Flair, and I said, God, that's the kiss of death. And he actually, in many ways, was a bigger star than Ric Flair ever was. Mm-hmm. So, maybe not a better worker, but, but a bigger star. Okay, Alexander Otsuka beat Takashi Sugiura, which, this was a sick match because the whole idea of this match was they were going to open up, and they were going to split both of their heads open by headbutting each other as hard as they could. So that's
Regal
what they did.
Benoit.
And, what?
Regal and Benoit.
Regal and Benoit, exactly. And Otsuka had fought Guy Metzger at King of the Cage a couple of weeks ago, maybe a little more than that. So he's got a lot of scar tissue. So he was busted open really bad. And Sugiura, who's a rookie, he's only been wrestling like 4 months, and has never bladed in a match. He didn't bust open much. He had a little bit of a cut, but heard that was a very, very good match. Sugiura's going to be something. He already is something. I mean. And then in the absolute most...
Just go to the website and read Dave's review of this match.
Yeah. The most inexplicable result that I think I have ever heard in my entire life. Sean McCulley knocked out Shinjiro Otani with... or actually, no, I take that back. He beat him with an armbar submission.
Submit.
Yeah, he made him submit to an armbar with punches from the mount. And I cannot... I don't even know what to say. I mean... It's like, oh, now what's going to happen? Like, I mean, they're not going to do anything to Sean McCulley. They can't. So anyway, I don't know what Shinjiro Otani has done in his life, but he must have done something very, very bad.
He must weigh in too.
Yeah, that's right. He got up to but they wanted him to get up to 230 because they said, we've got to remake you. You can't be a junior heavyweight. So he gets up to 230. He's usually about 200 pounds. He loses like 95% of his ability because he's too heavy. And then then he gets that, then the first thing he does is he gets a world title shot with Kensuke Sasaki, on that was the pay-per-view, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And the pay-per-view did very well, as I recall, which was stunning because, Otani, why would Otani be ready for a world title shot in a pay-per-view? And he loses that match, and then he comes back, and, not the next pay-per-view he does, but because they did one other one. I forget what happened at that. What did Otani do? Oh, Otani was with Murakami at the Kazunari Murakami at the first 0-1, which was a hell of a match. I mean, I thought that was maybe the best match on that whole show. It was awesome. And now he's got to lose in 4 minutes and 50 seconds to an armbar to a nobody. So anyway, Shinya Hashimoto and Tadao Yasuda beat Masao Inoue and Taman Honda. And I mean, this match was just being ridiculed everywhere for the idea that Honda and Inoue had no business, being in a semi-main event. And obviously they felt they had something to prove, and apparently they did really good. They wrestled way over their heads, and it was a really good match, but Inoue ended up dislocating his shoulder legitimately, and the match ended up having to be stopped. But anyway, but I heard it was a very exciting match. And then the main event was Mitsuharu Masao and Takeshi Rikio over Murakami and Naoya Ogawa. It was only 6 minutes and 40 seconds, but it was a hell of a 6 minutes and 40 seconds. The complaint, of course, was it was too short, and that Misawa trying to work shoot was very strange. Misawa got a phenomenal reaction coming out because this is actually his first match back at Budokan Hall, which is the site of all of his big wins since the split, since he left. And Rikio apparently must have done really good because when the show was over, Hiroshi Hase, who did the commentary, said that Rikio was the best guy on the entire show. And I heard...
wow.
So anyway, they also announced that there would be Pancras guys on the June 24th pay-per-view. Yesterday you were talking about how Prince Justice looked like a mix between Rhino, Paul White, and the bad Terry Gordy. I didn't say the bad Terry Gordy. I questioned which Terry Gordy looked like when someone said that. He goes, I just got my family pictures in, and in those my face looks like a combination of Rhino and the bad Terry Gordy. So much for making me feel good. Okay, let's see. This is from Lance Holder, who goes, what is the background of S.A. Rios? He's just a wrestler, a luchador from Guadalajara, who learned how to fly long before he learned how to wrestle, and now he's trying to catch up, and is actually pretty damn good and never gets on TV anyway, and he's the object of derision because he's short, and that's what happens when you're short in the WWF. How old is Gangrel? I believe 35 or 36. Is there a Memphis Championship Wrestling title? If so, who currently has it? There is. I think it's called the Southern Heavyweight title, and the last I heard, Steve Bradley held it, but that was a couple of weeks ago, so if I'm wrong, somebody will probably write in and let us know. Did Jim Duggan, Dustin Rhodes, Bam Bam Bigelow, or Madeja receive their termination papers? I think Dustin Rhodes did. The others, if they have not, they almost assuredly will, but I don't know. What is the status of Nicole Bass's lawsuit against the WWF? It's still out there. It hasn't been thrown out yet.
I think there was just an article on it a couple of days ago somewhere.
Oh, really? What did it say? I
can't remember. I didn't read it.
Oh, okay.
I was just informed that it was there.
Okay. Addressed this as part of her claim. Quote, in another event, this one nationally televised, she was subjected to motions made when her back was turned by a male wrestler which simulated a sexual act directed towards her buttocks. She was never told this would happen beforehand by the WWF. What is this referring to? Does anyone know what guy
I have no idea.
Did that? What sick man did that in the WWF? I can believe it happened. I can even picture certain guys there doing it.
Road Dogg.
I think it might have been him or Shawn Michaels. Because didn't Shawn Michaels have some confrontation with her where he sort of called her a man or something?
I think that was Shawn.
Yeah, it might have been Shawn. And certainly, let's see.
She must not have read the small print in the contract about leave your dignity at the door.
Everyone that goes there, I was thinking of going there. I go I basically encourage almost everyone because if you want to stay in wrestling, you got to. But I do mention that it may not be in your contract, but just think of it as the unwritten part of your contract because that's just reality. This is from Ben. With no competition anymore, wouldn't it be logical time to get over guys like Benoit, Jericho, and Angle as main event guys, especially Angle? He was there. Yeah, wouldn't you think so? After watching the Hardys take a big step down on the food chain on Raw and then reading the SmackDown results, I'm convinced Vince has the worst memory in wrestling. WCW was destroyed, among other things, because they refused to elevate new talent. I'm hopeful but not optimistic that things can get better. How will I say this? Until things get worse, I think that they can't get better. And hopefully when things get worse, then they will realize that that's the time you have to make the changes. But it's best to make the changes when things are good and not when they're bad. Because then what happens...
Not even necessarily make them, but start moving in that direction. Make some of them. it's not like you have to totally replace Austin Hunter and all these guys, but
no, you don't replace anyone. You just get
people
guys
need to
at
be
their level.
built up now. So when the time comes, people will, like just with Jeff Hardy we were talking about on Monday. Jeff Hardy was put in this position and nobody believed that he was ready. Now, if he'd been built up, for the past 6 months as almost being ready, then when this would have happened, everybody would have accepted it. So they need to do more building now. And, maybe some guys can, like Angle, hit that top spot and stay there as opposed to hitting it and being sent back down to the mid-card. Or the mid-card guys being sent even lower, like the Hardys. But it's something they need to start doing now, and they just aren't doing it.
This is for you, Brian. Could you please tell us about your wrestling career, your height and weight, and how you got into wrestling?
My wrestling career, I have a tape available on the website. It's pretty much all I can say about that. I'm 5'7", I'm 169 today, and I got started about 2 years ago when I was doing refereeing work for a group up here called, I don't remember what it was called, UIWA with Dave DeBasci. And he gave me a shot refereeing, and then Tim gave me a shot a month later wrestling, and I've wrestled for Tim ever since.
Okay. Let's see. I'd like to comment that I think William Regal is my favorite all-around personality. He is the funniest. I usually record Raw and SmackDown and find myself fast-forwarding a lot more than usual, but whenever Regal comes on the screen, he's a breath of fresh air. With a lot of characters in serious roles like Triple H, Regal is hilarious. I'm still anticipating a big match with Regal against someone like Benoit. I've heard they've had stellar matches, but only having access to the WF in Ireland, I have not seen any of their matches. Well, you'll get to see one Friday on the UK version. It's short. It's a 5-minute match, but you'll get to see one on the pay-per-view. Yeah, the pay-per-view, you'll really get to see one that'll probably be very good. Who, in your opinion... Bruno's on the line? Well, let's get to Bruno Sammartino. Bruno, how are you doing today?
Hello, who am I speaking to?
Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez.
Hello, Dave. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. What's been going on with you? What have you been up to since the last time we spoke?
Well, let's see. What month did I speak to you last? I don't even remember.
It's probably about 2 months ago.
2 months? Was it after I came back from Europe?
Oh, yeah. We talked about going to Italy or anything
well,
like that.
I just came back again last week. I was there again.
Oh, okay. Oh.
And so it was a nice trip. I went back to my town, took my wife with me so she could, because last time was such a rush trip, and this time we went and to absorb the thing a little bit more, and spend some time with the people. I still have relatives and friends there, and so it was a real great trip, and we just got back last week. So that's what's been happening with me.
How long were you there?
How long was I over there? About 12 or 13 days.
And you went back to your original hometown and saw the statue and everything, too?
Oh, yeah, well, sure, because my wife had not seen any of it, because the first time, it was such a rushed thing. I went and had to come back, so that's why we went back, and, so she saw everything, and again, we had a lot more time to kind of absorb the whole thing, not only the statue, but, she got to see the home, but not only, they opened the house for us, so she could really look at the home that my parents built, the home that I was born in and all that, and then that sports facility and so forth, and then spend a lot of time with the townspeople, because they're very, very nice, and they only want you to stop in their houses and all that, and they told stories when we were kids and stuff like that. So it was a really, really wonderful, it was just great.
One thing for the people who did not listen to the show the first time you were on, why don't you tell us a little bit? You went to Pizza Ferrato. Is that the name of the town you were born in?
Hey, pretty good. Yeah, Pizza Ferrato. That's correct.
Okay, and just I guess around December or so, whatever it was, so just tell them about the different things they did in honor of you there.
Okay. Well, December the 8th is a big holiday in Italy. Well, I guess here too for Christians. It's called the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. And in our town, of course, it's a very big holiday, and they chose that day to honor me. And what they did, which was a really surprise for me, because I had no inkling. Believe me when I tell you, I don't know if you remember the coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers, a guy by the name of Chuck Noll. Chuck Noll had a saying that when you were through, when he felt you were through playing football, that you should go on with the rest of your life. And that's exactly how I felt with my career in wrestling. Once I retired, I thought that was all behind me, and I go on with the rest of my life. So when these things came up, like being honored for my weightlifting career and all that, these were all tremendous surprises. But this one in Italy, this was a shocker for me. It was really overwhelming and so forth, because they built this sports facility, which they put my name to it. Then in the home that my parents built and the home that I was born in and that, you have to understand in this town where I come from, there were no doctors or anything like that in those mountains. So, you were born in no hospitals or anything. You were born in your own home, and you had what I guess they call the midwives who helped out, with the births and all that. And so that home, they put a slab of marble on the sides, pretty big, and it says this is the home that Bruno Sammartino was born in. And then the third, of course, was the monument that they did, and then that night they had a play, which I had no inkling about. It was quite a shocker to me, and the play was about my life, but it wasn't my life as far as like my wrestling career or anything like that. It was about this kid who during the war, when we were hiding from the Nazis, and we went to a mountain called the Valle Roca, where we spent 14 months. And they were 14 months of sheer hell because, first of all, there was starvation and no food. Second of all, the winters in those mountains one has to experience to believe how ferocious they are. And thirdly, the constant bombings that were always coming around. And so to survive all that, you have to be extremely fortunate. And, of course, we were among the lucky ones because many did not make it. And so then when my father had already come here prior to the war, then all passages were closed, and he was stuck here, and we were stuck there. So my poor mom was stuck with her kids, and we were very young, and so she had to make all kinds of sacrifices and take a lot of chances and so forth for our survival. And, of course, we did survive. And then when my dad and my mom connected again, my dad asked the question, should I come back? Because those were the plans. He would work here like so many foreigners to build a life for over there. That's how my dad saved up for the money to build a house. And he was a blacksmith by trade. So he was going to go back eventually after he had bought enough land, because we lived off our land over there. And in the house, he had built a shop at the basement for his blacksmith work, and that was the gold. But, of course, everything then was changed because of the war. And when the question came up, should he still come back or try to bring us over, my mom said, for the kids' sakes, I think it's best if you could try to get us over there, because there'll be more opportunities for them to live a normal life than over here, because over here it's sort of destroyed that what future's there, And so the decision was made, and that's when my dad started doing what he had to do, and finally in 1950 he was able to bring us over here. And that's basically, the story.
Now, how old were you when you were living in the mountains? You were probably 5, 6 years older. Is that right?
No, I was a little older than that, because after the fall of Mussolini, where the Germans didn't take too kindly to us, and they came and invaded our area. It was around the middle of 43 to 45. So I was born in 1935. So, we're talking about from the time of 8 to 10 years of age.
Okay. Now, did you first, when you moved to the United States, was it to Pittsburgh originally, or did you live somewhere before Pittsburgh?
No. My father had come here to work, and the reason why he came to Pittsburgh was because some friends were able to, they tried to help each other in getting jobs, and so it started out where somebody got him a job working construction. And so it was here in Pittsburgh. So my dad had come to Pittsburgh because this is where there was a job waiting for him. And so that's how it became our home,
Now, this is totally in a different direction, and on back to wrestling and everything.
Okay.
What were your thoughts when you basically got the word? I know you don't follow wrestling closely. Yeah. That basically the ECW was done and the WCW was done, and Vince McMahon basically now actually has it all.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're right. I never watch it, but I do get calls. I have friends who keep calling me. They need to inform me. They need to tell me what's going on. And again, as I give my opinion, I know there'll be people out there who'll say, well, he doesn't like Vince McMahon, so what do you expect him to say? I honestly believe, and I say this in all sincerity, that for the wrestlers, that they're all going to be the big losers. You see,
in the long run, no doubt.
You know, I mean, McMahon now, you want to talk a monopoly. I mean, now, let's supposing that some of the guys may not be happy with the way they're treated, the contract when it expires. You know, McMahon says take it or leave it. What are they going to do? Where are they going to go? I mean, they're going to find that this was the worst thing, in my opinion, this was the worst thing that could have possibly happened to professional wrestling. And I think that down the road, a lot of people are going to find just that out.
Do you think that Vince will start taking advantage of people because of that down the road?
Absolutely.
He's been pretty good so far, but, you know, a year down the road, who knows?
Absolutely. I think that he will. I think, in fact, don't be surprised that if he doesn't try to develop even some newer talent, and that so that he can start getting rid of the so-called superstars of today who may be a little more demanding and so forth and so on, that he can bring a new crew, so to speak, of younger talent, and he can give them whatever he wants, and they'll be thrilled to have the opportunity, not having been spoiled by the big contracts that I'm hearing that are given out there. And so I wouldn't be a bit surprised if some of the bigger guns, as younger people are developed, and McMahon, I'm sure, is hoping that he can develop them into becoming stars, so that he can start eliminating these other people, and he'll have basically an organization with the payroll won't have to be too high, so that maybe if NBC gets away from the XFL, if he chooses to continue on his own, he'll have more money to lose with that, because he won't be giving it to the wrestlers.
Well, they just came out with something today on that. They're estimating the losses. Actually, the losses so far this year, which is not all that long since we're talking January 1st, of $76 million on the XFL.
Oh my goodness!
For just the WWF, or is that like
no, half WWF, half NBC. WWF will have lost 38, and NBC will have lost 38 on it.
Oh my God! I didn't know that. I had heard.
That just came out today.
I had heard that maybe they were estimating, I think NBC came out a few months ago, that they were estimating that they could lose up to $30 million, but my goodness, $76 million.
That's just so far. I mean, there'll still be more losses. Now, if NBC pulls out, but I think
if
the way
they
the
pulled out,
contract
then next year that would be $76 million if they lost exactly the same just for Vince, right?
Okay, but there's something in the contract. If NBC pulls out, they have to pay a penalty to Vince because they committed for 2 years. So, and I think the penalty is pretty darn high, and I also, of the understanding that NBC is quite willing to pay that penalty. I think I saw somewhere that number was $50 million.
50?
So, 50, that they will pay $50 million to get out of the contract next year. I don't know. Now, I don't know that one. I don't know if that figure to be true. That was a figure that I read somewhere. But even so, they're going to lose.
So really, if Vince got out of it, and they paid him $50 million. He could come out on top.
No. He would have to continue operating it for them to pay him on that. Because if the league folds, they don't have to pay anyone anything, I don't think.
Okay.
So that may be a reason that he goes for the second season, but even so, they're going to lose more money the second season than the first because they won't have the good first weeks. They're not going to be able to sell ad time. And the ticket sales, went so far down as the league went on, so they're going to have a lot lower ticket sales next year.
Well,
so, he's still going to lose a ton of money, even with $50 million.
That's exactly what I was going to say. If they may give him $50 million if he continues, but I believe that the losses would be greater a second year than they were even the first year. And so instead of 76, who knows, they might be 90 and 100. So even if he does get $50 million from them, look how much it's still going to have to come out of his own pocket. But you know what? I don't believe and this is just gut feeling because I don't know anything about what he's going to do. But I think that McMahon is talking game right now about that NBC gets out that he'll continue on. But I don't buy it. I think that there will come a time when he's going to say, for whatever reason that he'll come up with, and if NBC folds or gets out of this, as say they are, I don't believe McMahon will continue on his own. I really don't.
One of the things that I think a lot of fans today don't realize, because there's not a lot of history on wrestling, and then if you go back to, say, the 60s, there was wrestling in so many, we talk about a Brazil or a France or a Spain or India or Pakistan. I mean, all of these countries actually had professional wrestling, and now very few of them do. Yeah, and do you even know why? I mean, I know you probably went to a lot of them, but I mean, it's one of those things where I look back at like old newsletters and I see like, my God, there was, or England, like where you read about like that they would have 30 shows a night in England or something.
Yeah.
And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. And I'm going like, there was so much wrestling during this period where people think there was no wrestling, and now when people think that wrestling's so big, there's actually, as far as matches, there's not a whole hell of a lot of matches every night.
No, that's true, Dave. For example, like in the 60s, like when I was touring South America, my goodness, they had a lot of wrestling going on in all those countries, whether it be in Argentina and Brazil. I mean, I remember in Caracas, in Venezuela, they had this old stadium that used to have bullfights many years ago, I guess. And there were about, let's see, what did it hold, 38,000 people, and we complete sellout. They must have turned them away by the thousand. That's how big and popular it was. In Manila, in 68, I don't remember the year for sure, but same thing. I mean, in a big building. I don't know the name of the building, but same thing. I mean, it was really big. Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because a lot of people think that wrestling is big today, but yesteryear, it was like Mickey Mouse. Like I heard one time, which I was insulted by it. Hogan said in an interview that they took wrestling from the small smoke-filled back alley place to the main arenas. I found that so offensive, because we were in all the big arenas, for not only when I started, but of course way before my time ever came. And to suggest that wrestling was like that back then, I would tell people like him and others that there was a heck of a lot more respect for professional wrestling back in those days than certainly there is today.
One thing, a couple of questions that we got early in the week before, when people found out you were going to do the show. There's a question, a couple of people asked me about it, and I really wasn't aware of this, but a lot of people have asked, is there still any tension with you and Larry Zbyszko?
Is there tension between me and Larry Zbyszko? Not as far as I'm concerned, but I haven't. Well, let me put it this way. We haven't seen each other or talked to each other for many, many, many years. We are not on friendly basis, but not because of, what happened in 1980. I really don't like to get into it, but there's a couple other things that have happened that I think I'll just go as far as just saying that I was at some disappointments concerning Zbyszko, and our friendship, there's no friendship. Let me put it that way.
Okay. There's another question we got here. A couple people have asked and brought up Tony Marino, who you dubbed. Was that your idea to call him Batman in the 60s?
Absolutely not. Tony Marino was wrestling as the Batman, and when I was in Pittsburgh, he contacted me to come in. But Tony knew, and that's why he was trying to convince me, because I was very, very outspoken in those days. I did not like gimmicks. I wanted guys to go in the ring with tights and boots and that, and I absolutely always despised gimmick from the first day I got into the business. And so he contacted me because he knew that I had some say-so, and I said, Tony, you look tremendous. Tony had competed in the Mr. America contest back in 1951 and 52. He had a great physique and all that. And I said, and he had a background, he was a good athlete. He played football too, besides wrestling. And he said, please, he says, beg of you, just to let me come in so I get some attention, because he hadn't, for whatever reason, he had never gotten a real break in wrestling. He said, let me just come in with this. He says, and then he says, we'll take it off. He says, we'll come up with a reason why, it's going to come off, but just so it'll make a little bit of an impact. I tried to talk him out of it, but I knew he was very, very strong. He believed in it so much, and so I went against my own belief, and I said, okay, Tony. I said, but it can't be long range. It has to be for a short period of time. He agreed. Came into, I helped him, he came into Pittsburgh where they had the tri-state wrestling at the time, where between the part of Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Ohio. And he came in as the Batman, but as the time came, he had to take it off because that was the agreement, and he did.
One of the things
the whole Batman costume, like the superhero?
Yeah. That's
the mask
what he was
with the
wearing.
ears and the cape?
Excuse me?
The cape and everything?
Yeah, that's what he would come in the ring with. Then he would take the cape off, of course, but he would maintain the Batman outfit.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to bring up something totally different, which is kind of about lifting and powerlifting and things like that. There was an article in a muscle magazine that I read, I think with about 2 months ago, I'm guessing, where they listed, it was very interesting, they listed like the strongest men who ever lived. And you were on that, they had about 20 names, guys that you would be familiar with. I'm not sure how many of our listeners would, like the Douglas Hepburns and the Paul Andersons of that era, and people, Bill Kazmaier and, people from the current era. And you were on that list, and, one of the things they were doing was, like, comparing lifts at the times and things like that. And the author said that if you were doing what the guys today were doing, that he had no doubt that you would be bench pressing more than 700 pounds.
Well, if I had been on you mean the steroids and that?
Steroids and bench shirt was what he was, and the supplementation that the guys do and things like that was what he was talking about. Yeah.
Well, you see, Dave, you have to understand something too. That when I got into professional wrestling, I had achieved my lifts at that age, because once you got in wrestling and you start banging your elbows and you start banging this and that, your lifts aren't going to go up. They're going to come down. So I honestly believe, I've always felt in my heart anyway, that if I had not gone into professional wrestling, if I had had the right job that allowed me the proper, because remember, I was a construction worker before I turned pro, so it wasn't easy working 8-10 hours a day construction and then going to the gym at night and pump iron so anyway, I got up to I did 565 on a bench press, and I did it with a 2-second pause on the chest. You weren't allowed to use elbow pads or anything that later on guys started using. I did over 700 pounds in a squat and deadlift and what have you. Now, I did this all prior to my 23rd birthday. Now, you don't reach your peak in powerlifting till you're in your 33, 34, and maybe even up to 35. That's for powerlifting. For Olympic lifting, I think you would peak out by the age of 30, although we had guys that did phenomenal after 35, 36, but those were rare cases. I believe that if I had a better job than what I had and had not gone into wrestling to, bang up the elbows and back and all that stuff, I honestly believe that without the drugs, I would have gotten up to around 650 or better on the bench.
Wow. Nobody was doing.
Excuse me?
Nobody was doing that in that era, were they?
No, when I did 565, nobody was doing it.
Yeah.
Wow. Not really. Well, let me take it back. Doug Hepburn of Canada. He was around that range, but he had done 550. But in all fairness to him, he was spending a lot of time with the Olympic lifting and not as much on the power lifts, for example, as I was. I was spending much less time on my Olympic lifting than I was on my power lifting. I did both, and I competed in both, but I was more of I don't know, what do you want to call it, a natural, or had more drive or whatever in my power lifting. But there was a little difference too. Doug Hepburn was a 350-pound guy. When I'm doing these things, I'm at about 260, 265, and 270.
Now, what are your workouts like nowadays?
Excuse me?
What are your workouts like nowadays? Are you still doing any of those lifts?
What I do now is I work out every day. For example, I work out a lot with the dumbbells and dumbbell bench pressing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not strong or anything like I was, but I can still go up to the 100-pound dumbbells, and I do sets of eights with them. I'm 65. I'm going to be 66 years old, and I still do curls with the 55s and 60-pound dumbbells. So
I hope all of our listeners are embarrassed.
Well, no, I don't. But yeah,
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because it's like you've got to be a very strong 30-year-old to do those weights. Oh my God.
Well, but
go ahead.
I used to use the 100-pounders for curls years ago. For dumbbell curls. I used to use 100 pounds on each hand.
Me.
But I do the 100 pounds I do for dumbbell bench press. I use the 90-pounders for laterals, flies on a flat bench. and dumbbells. But then I do a lot of other stuff with the machine. I have a universal machine here. And then on the next day, since I don't run much, because of my bad back, my orthopedic surgeons told me that I should not run and do the bike instead. So I do the bike a minimum of 1 hour, but more times than not, I go up to size an hour and a half each time, and then I would do full exercise, like different kind of leg raises, leg extension, crisscross, all kind of stuff that's not only good for the abs, but it's good for the back when you have a bad back. And so one day it's strictly aerobic, and another day it's mostly dumbbell, and then I do some exercise with the machine.
Who are some of the stronger guys that you've come across, whether it be in wrestling or in the gym? Like, I'm just thinking of a guy like, say, Ken Patera, who came a little bit after you, but was also phenomenally strong, and I don't know, maybe Paul Anderson, some of those type of guys. I mean, how would you rate their strength, and were there any wrestlers that you would know about that were actually phenomenally strong, but maybe never got the credit because they never competed as powerlifters?
Well, did you ever hear of a guy, unfortunately, he got killed in Minnesota. He was in an accident. He was riding the car with Red Bastien, and they were
Hercules Cortez.
Who?
Hercules Romero.
Yeah, I was going to say Pepe Chichero. I knew him as Pepe Chichero.
That's his real name, yeah.
Yeah, he was a strong guy. He wasn't like a great Olympic lifter or even all-around power lifter, because he didn't like squats and his legs didn't match the rest of his body. But he was a good bench presser. I think he got up to around 500 pounds on a bench. And I'm not sure, because I never worked out with him, so I'm not sure what other lifts he could do. But I did hear of him benching 500 or so. And so that was keep in mind, too, guys, David and Brian, that a lot of guys that you mention nowadays, now I'm not going to get into that because I like some of these people. You mentioned Kaz Meyer and different guys. But remember, too, that when you talk about some of these people, you're talking about the guys who were drug users. By drug users, the steroids.
Well, pretty much all the world-class lifters, it's almost considered a given now.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So when you mix those few of us who never touched that stuff versus those who were on it and on it pretty good, well, then maybe we weren't rated right up with them, but we were outdone. Keep in mind that not only did they use that stuff, but they also, the size, some of these guys were 300, 350 pounds, 375. That helps too, because that added body weight, is strength. So to me, I just like this weightlifting thing that I was honored recently. What they try to do is they look back at yesterday and find out guys, and they do pretty good homework as to who might have done some drugs or not. And there are lifters who have who have done good lifting, and they will not honor them because they know for a fact that they were using these drugs, and so they will not honor them.
Let's go to the phone calls. We've got a full bank of calls. We're going to start with Charles in Connecticut. Charles, what's going on?
How you doing? Bruno?
I'm fine, Charles. How are you?
Yeah, it's a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, thank you.
I want to know when Vince started, what you thought when Vince started buying up all the territories and he started expanding nationally.
He didn't buy too many territories. I think the only one he actually bought was Stu. He bought Stu Hart's for $1 million, paid him $100,000, and never paid him the other $900. So Stu never actually got the rest of his money until a couple months ago.
Yeah. Okay. Bought or took over. Okay.
He took over.
I knew right away that was.
Well, he did buy his father's territory also. I should say that. Yeah. Anyway, however that worked.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead, Bruno.
Well, I was around at the time, so I know a little bit about that too. But anyway, the point is that what did I think of it? I thought this is going to be a losing situation for the wrestlers. You have to understand something, that in those days when you had so many different territories, the wrestlers, in my opinion, they had it made in the sense that if you weren't happy in a particular territory because maybe you'd been there a little too long, and maybe the promoters felt that the best of you, had been used, and you're more or less now have to play second, third, and fourth banana on the territory. You were free then to make your contacts and move on and so forth. And a lot of times, like I remember guys that I wrestled in New York, for example, whether it be Koloff or whether it be Tanaka or whether it be Bill Miller, Don Leo Jonathan, these people, would get the great publicity for having wrestled here, there, and they had no problem when they were, let's say, done in that particular area to move on to other areas and remain headliners and be fresh in other territories. And those guys that weren't necessarily headliners, they still could move on from territory to territory and always be employed and always, do okay. What happened when he started doing that, for one thing, I believed, and I said at the time, that seeing the direction that he was going, a lot of these territories eventually would die, and they would no longer be territories, but maybe eventually would. And I made that prediction to the guys at the time who thought that what McMahon was doing was great and it was going to be, wow, for those of us who work for him, we're going to be wrestling all over the country and all the arenas everywhere. I said, well, you're going to find that a lot of these places are going to fold. And eventually it'll be to where either if he succeeds, he'll be the only one. Of course, when Ted Turner bought, the NWA, I felt that with the power, the money power that they had, that he could stand up to McMahon and be a force. Which eventually, of course, as we all know, they were the two, the WCW and the WWF. But it did away with all the territories. And look at what's happened since. Yes, it's true. Some of the guys are making money like guys like myself and people in my time would never have imagined that people could make. At least I'm going by what I'm told that they make anyway. But by the same token, look how many guys are out of work or these independents that really are not putting them down, but they're really Mickey Mouse stuff. Whereas in the days of the territories, maybe nobody made $1 million or millions of dollars a year, but I'll tell you, everybody was making a darn good living, and everybody stayed employed, and everybody could move from one territory to another. And it was just, in my opinion, that was still the best system.
Yeah, I know you don't watch any wrestling today, but what are the like some contemporary wrestlers that you like from the 80s or the early 90s or whatever?
When he first came out, and I do mean when he first came out before he became what he is now, I thought that Scott Steiner looked, and I'm not talking about his physical appearance, I thought his work in the ring. When I first saw him a good while ago, I can't remember if it was maybe 1990, I don't remember the year, but I thought he looked very, very good. The way he was moving and so forth, and I thought, that of course I'm impressed with guys like this Benoit. I think this guy is very impressive with his work in the ring. I think Malenko. I think and there are a lot of other guys I don't even know. Because like I say, from then I haven't watched it in such a long time. But there were a lot of guys that I thought were very impressive in the things they could do. Now, what I'm not impressed with, not that that I could ever have done any of it, but these acrobatic guys, that doesn't impress me. Not that it doesn't impress me that it's a heck of a talent to be able to do that, but it doesn't impress me to have that in wrestling. I don't like that in wrestling. To me, that's not wrestling. When you had an individual many years ago who did some of that acrobatic stuff, like a Rock or Carpentier, there was there was just one or two guys. But now, some of these guys with their triple somersaults and quadruple front flips, whatever they do, there's so much of it and so many of them that to me it's completely taken away from wrestling.
Anything else, Charles?
What about Hulk Hogan or Ric Flair?
No, as far as Ric Flair was always a talented guy, a very hard worker, very talented. I just feel the only negative I say about Flair was that as the years went on and on and on, he became very routinish about, you could almost predict everything he was going to do. And when you get like that, well, I don't know. And as far as Hogan, well, let's forget about it. I mean, when you mention Flair and Hogan, let's not even mention the same two in the same breath. I never saw Hogan as any kind of a talent. I'm sorry, but it's just the way I feel. He was just a guy. He's a big guy. He looked great due to the aid of some chemicals. But as far as to suggest that he was a great guy in that ring. No, I never thought that.
Bruno,
yes, sir.
We have a bunch of questions here. The story is about Zbyszko again. Is it true? I remember when I was a kid, this was the story, and I mean, how accurate is the story that Larry Zbyszko basically walked over to your house, introduced himself, and said that he wanted to be a wrestler?
Mm-hmm. He lived in a neighborhood, okay, and he used to be a fan of mine. I found out later, and he was a kid. He was in first year of high school, and he was on a wrestling team. He had joined the wrestling team there, and he used to somehow, boy, it was spooky. Like he knew when I was coming home, and in those days I'd come home maybe twice a month or something like that because they had me on the go so much. That is in my first reign, with those 8 years. And then he would come to me and say, he was very polite. Says, Mr. Sammartino, he said, I'd like to be a wrestler someday, and blah, blah, blah. And I said to him, well, what are you doing now? You're going to school? He said, yes. I said, are you wrestling in school? He said, yeah. I said, well, keep up and be the best you can be in high school. I said, and after high school, I said, you should think of college. I said, and then if you want to go into professional wrestling, I said, but get your education and all that. Well, he would keep coming over, and every time, like, I'd come home almost, and later as he got older, he sometimes one would like to take a little workout, and I'd work out with him a little bit if I was going to be home for a little bit. And the guy got to like him, he was doing very, very well with his wrestling in school and that. And so when it came time he graduated from high school, his parents came to me, his mother actually, and said, he really looks up to you, and we want him to go to college. He has to go to college, but he wants to be a professional wrestler. He says, he won't listen to us. Please, if you talk to him, I think he might listen to you. So I had a talk with him, and I told him, I says, look, you go to college. I says, and if you go to college and you graduate from college, I promise you I will help you get into wrestling if you still would like to get into professional wrestling. I said, but if you don't go to college, I said, no, I'm not going to lift a finger for you, because I said, you live to regret not getting that education. Very reluctantly, he did, and his parents, of course, were very, very happy. And I must say, he did go to college. But in my thoughts, I thought, well, he's getting older, goes to college, he's going to major in something, and maybe he'll, get a good job. In other words, he'll change his mind and forget about wrestling. But boy, he never did. And so after he graduated from college, heck, I got a phone call, I think before his folks did, that he said that he had, yeah, I mean it, that he did it, and now he was looking for me to keep my word. And then of course, I did. I helped him to get into wrestling. I worked out with him whenever I had the opportunity, because I was wrestling around here at time now and then, so I would meet with him, work out with him. And then I helped him get into in Oklahoma and Portland, Oregon, smaller territories, to get the experience. And eventually we brought him around to New York.
Now, you also, your son David, wrestled, and that was you were very reluctant about that one. In fact, you discouraged him from doing it, and your other sons. Did any of them, because of who their father was, want to get into wrestling? Because the other sons did not get into wrestling.
Yeah, David, I did my best, not just to discourage wrestling. I wanted him to go to college, and I did like with Zbyszko. I says, look, if you go to college, I will. If you still want to go into professional wrestling, but if you have that education behind you, I said, if you're coming from the old country and that, I was a strong believer, because I never did. See, I was offered a scholarship at the University of Pittsburgh, but it was a year-per-year scholarship. I had to prove myself both wrestling-wise and academically to go to the second year. And to be perfectly honest with you, I was scared of it because high school wasn't easy for me. You have to understand, when I came to this country, I couldn't speak a word of English. So, and then I used to hear those guys up at the Pitt Field House, that's at the University of Pittsburgh, where we used to work out. They used to say about, oh man, this guy would say, I've been up till 4 o'clock in the morning studying, oh, it was so tough. And I thought, my God, if it's hard for these people, what chance have I got, academically, I just had no confidence. And my dad at the time knew this Italian carpenter, a contractor who could get me in the union as an apprentice carpenter, and I chose that way because I honestly didn't believe, I didn't have the faith that I could cut it. But but that was my thing because I came from a foreign country and it was this language thing and all that. But my sons, if there's one thing I wanted, and I wanted very, very badly, was for them to get that education because I'm one of those who believes that if you get an education that you can always, your chances of making out in life are much better than those who don't. And so, but with David, I had no luck. He said, if you don't help me, he says, I'll do it on my own. And he did it on his own because I did not work out or train or anything with him. He got other people to work out with him, and I wasn't even aware of it at the time. And before I knew it, he got somebody, one of the, to fix him up to go to, where did he go? Puerto Rico for months and months. And anyway, that's how he got into it. But no, not against my wishes. My other two guys, they wrestled in school. One of them was a pretty good pitcher. He was a very good pitcher, but he messed up his elbow, and then he went into track, and he started throwing the javelin. But he had a very, very strong arm. And in fact, even with the messed up elbow, they just had him in the paper. They went back 15 years of some records that were set in the school for track and so forth, and they had him for his record still hasn't been broken for the javelin throw. He threw around 210 feet or something like that, and it still stands 15 years later in the high school. But then he started wrestling too, but as far as professional wrestling, I told him, I said, get that education, forget professional wrestling. And then, in all honesty, guys, as they saw the wrestling change and so forth and so on, that in itself, I think, kind of changed their minds as well. I don't think that they wanted to be in it. I'm not saying that they necessarily would have had the opportunity to get in it, because once McMahon became the big guy, and my situation in him, I doubt very much if he would have been that anxious to have my sons wrestle for him. But I think they changed their mind on their own, and they still work out. In fact, one of the guys, he still likes to work out on a mat with another kid he graduated with from Slippery Rock University, and they still go and work out on a mat a couple of days a week. They work out with the weights first, and then they go work out on a mat. But they have their jobs, and that's it. No wrestling.
Okay, before we go back to the calls, I just want to answer two quick questions here. This is from Hector, who goes, on behalf of the chat room, I would like to ask you what is a BA. That's when you pull your pants down, bare ass. This is something that I mentioned earlier in the show. And this is from Sean Keys, who was at SmackDown last night.
The whole chat room didn't know that one?
Can you believe that, Brian?
Shame on you guys.
I know. Weren't you ever in high school? Anyway, last night at SmackDown, they bleeped out the Big Show's interview. So, Brian, that tells you what he said, doesn't it?
Yep, he did.
Yep. Oh, well. When they showed the scene again, and he goes, Brock Lesnar and Shelton Benjamin look like stars. Lesnar's scary looking, and Benjamin is a lot bigger than I thought, plus he had really cool ring gear on. They were the highlight of the show for me, and can you believe there was no Stephanie? She must not have written that show. Actually, she did. Or partially did. Wait till you see Chyna before her match looking in the mirror. It made me sick. Oh, boy. Oh, I guess something else to look forward to here. This is from Alan in New York, who said that I have a question for Bruno. I know that you worked on numerous occasions for All Japan Pro Wrestling. Actually, well, he did work for All Japan, but he worked for the old group in the 60s a lot, too. Last June, Mitsuharu Misawa, who was Baba's number one wrestler, split and formed, took 90% of the wrestlers and everything. Do you follow, like, basically what happened there with Misawa taking everyone from All Japan and what your opinion is of that?
You mean what's going on now?
What happened? Yeah, what's going on now with All Japan and Noah Sport?
I haven't the slightest idea what's going on now. I really don't. When I went to Japan for that tribute that they did for Shohei Baba, I had been told at the time when I was there that his wife was going to take over, and then I heard later from somebody, I'm not even sure who from, that a lot of the wrestlers had taken off, and recently Stan Hansen told me he wanted to send me a photo. He wanted to send me a photo showing how I broke my neck, and that
your head going straight down. Yeah.
Yeah, he wanted to show me that, and he was telling me that she was still struggling to carry on. But I really know nothing of what's going on in Japan.
Do you remember this question asking about Baba and also Jumbo Tsuruta? Do you have any thoughts about those two guys?
Did I ever what?
Thoughts about it. I know you knew Baba very, very well.
Very
Jumbo
well.
Tsuruta also. I mean, you would have
Let me tell you something quick today that you might be interested in. When Baba and Inaki were still together, the same organization.
Yeah, that's the 60s.
Yeah, and then Inaki was going to go on his own. What happened was a tag team match in Osaka with me and Dominic DeNucci against Baba and Inaki. And Inaki, because I was one of the guys, I'm not going to tell you I was the only guy by any means, but for God's sakes, but I was one of the top guys over there. That I used to do very good business when I wrestled Baba, and it's who I usually wrestled. And anyway, Inaki, because he and I never hit it off, just never did. So he tried to pull a little double cross in that particular match because Baba, poor guy, didn't even know what was going on, that Inaki was leaving. This is like a little bit of a double cross. It was hard to understand all the politics of it all over there because of the language barrier. You just knew that something was going on, but I really wasn't sure. So I'm in the ring, and Inaki tried to cross me. He had been working out with Dutch some, and he tried to cross me to beat me, so that I guess they were going to use it for public
so he had a
whatever.
pinfall on you because very few people did, right? Yeah.
Excuse me?
So he was going to try to get a pinfall on you, which very few people got. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he tried, and then when I saw what was going on, and I saw that, then I fought him off, and I got off of him. And anyway, making a long story short, I hooked him with a front face lock and almost broke his damn neck. But he managed to, because we were by that corner, he tagged Baba. Then he never came back in the ring for the rest of the match. But I told Joey Gucci, I said, something is going on. I said, I don't speak your language or anything. I said, but you better tell Baba to be careful. Something is happening here. And then I came back after the thing was over, and I found out then that he had, that they had split, and Inaki had formed his own organization.
One quick thing, and then we're going to start going to the phone calls. This is from Garen Shea, who was also at the TV tapings last night in Nashville, who said, I've got a couple of observations. He goes, I did not hear one person cheering for Steve Austin. The turn has finally worked. He goes, I was very impressed with Randy Orton. The crowd even applauded Japanese style after his match. That's Bob Orton. Bruno, you would know his grandfather, Bob Orton Sr.
Oh, yes, I wrestled Bob Orton many times.
Yeah, just his grandson just started wrestling just in the last couple of months. He's
so
doing
whose
very
son
well.
would he be?
Bob, he's Bob Jr.'s son.
Oh,
the one who wrestled in the WWF, yeah.
Oh.
And he goes, at a time when WCW can only afford to have positive a build-up, I think they were really buried last night. And we'll have to watch how that turns out. Let's go to David in Nebraska. David, what's going on?
Hi, Bruno.
Yes, sir.
I tell you, it is an honor and a privilege to get to speak with you. I grew up in Boston, and you were my hero growing up. You really were.
Oh, thank you very kindly.
When I was a kid, we used to have this Catholic priest, Brother Bob Russell, who used to take us to the garden every month. And, I just wish there was something like that was still available. Something that, I could take a kid to and not be embarrassed by.
Or a priest.
What was that, Bri?
A priest. Think about that.
Yeah, think about that. That's right.
It's just, it's really a shame to see what's happened with the sport. I mean, I'm trying to get into Japanese wrestling, and the language it seems to be stopping me.
Oh, and it's also 3 years too late.
Yeah. It's really.
I still like it, but it just the guys are really banged up there. They worked a very hard style, and the younger guys just aren't ready for the spots, and it's kind of like one of those in between periods there. It's not really very good. I don't say it's not very good, but it's not what it once was.
But it's better than what we've got here right now, Dave. I really do believe
different.
that.
It's different. I don't want to knock the guys because I think that the guys in the ring are very, very good. But everyone's got their ideas of taste, and I could see why people don't like it. And hey, my girlfriend's younger brother is a big wrestling fan, and there's a lot of times when there's stuff on where I'm just going like, I don't want him. Or, there's times where you don't want him watching it because you don't know what you're going to see. They're not. To me, one of the things I don't like about WWF is that they know what their audience is, but they're not responsive to it, and then they wash their hands and say that's not our audience when they know full well it is. A lot of the stuff they do, if they didn't have a kids' audience, it wouldn't bother me so much. but they know they do, and then they try to say that, oh, we don't market to kids. And it's like when they start saying that, you're just going like, wait a minute. Now, come on. Don't
Vince on Costas talking about everybody watched SmackDown. It's the most watched show among families. And then talking about, showing clips of everything on that show.
Yeah.
Well, I just think it's a shame. Bruno, I've got two questions for you.
Okay.
First one being, when I was a kid, I got a whole bunch of pictures of you. I got a couple with Ken Patera and a couple of you just, coming out of the ring and all. Is there like a P.O. box or somewhere that I could mail something to you to have you autograph it?
It's amazing you don't have my address, because I get mail every single day from people sending me photos to sign or requesting it. I don't know where they get my address, but I thought maybe it was in these internets or someplace. I don't know.
Probably.
I'd be happy to do that, but obviously I can't give my address over the phone.
Right. That's why I was hoping that you had a
no, I don't.
Like a P.O. box or something. Oh well, I'll find that one eventually, as most people do. The other question is, in Lou Thesz's book, Hooker.
Yeah.
He really wasn't real kind to you.
Well, you know what? I'm glad you mentioned it, because I want to tell Dave before we get off. There's a couple of points I would like to clear up that I think is very important. If you can allow me a couple of minutes.
Oh, please do.
Okay. And maybe you can listen, and then I'll tell you about that.
Okay.
Let's do that right now.
Yeah, let's do it right now.
Do it right now?
Yeah,
okay. Sure. Dave, I know that you interviewed him, and I'm not faulting you that because you basically, at least from what I'm told and what was read to me, what Thez told you, and I wish that I had been given the opportunity to give my side. But let me tell you the facts, and these are the facts. What happened was that the WWF, we were going really strong. I mean, Vince McMahon was getting requests from NWA territories for my services. I went to Tennessee for Nick Goulas, worked both Memphis and Nashville. I go to Florida for Miami for Chris Dundee, and then I went to St. Petersburg, all over the place. And so what happened was that in the national the convention that they used to have every year for wrestling, they used to hold it in Vegas. Vince McMahon and Sam Machine got together, so forth and so on, about all what was he doing. There was that set everything on fire so much, so forth and so on. During that meeting, they had conversation about unifying the title, and okay, so. The problem then came as they started having meetings on doing this was the dates. Sam Machnick needed 15 days a month of the champion. Vince McMahon couldn't do he had to have 17 days. They had
we're getting into trouble now.
Yeah, they had all these meetings. I was never in any of the meetings, I must say. I heard that Thez was in one of them. True or not, I don't know, but that's what I was told. Anyway, bottom line. What happened was that this was the big thing. In those days, I was working every day because 2 days a month I used to go for Frank Taney, the Maple Leaf Garden, because when I left Frank Taney, he was such an honorable man, a man that I really respected and liked. When he asked me if I would come in, I sacrificed those 2 Sundays to go home with my family to keep my word with Frank, because I really liked Frank. But it was becoming too much. When a guy named Phil Zacco, whether you guys know him or not, knew him or not, he was with Vince McMahon and Tootsmont. He and I were good friends, and he told me on a Thursday where we used to go to Washington to do the TV, and he said to me, he said, they're fighting over these things. I don't know why they want to do that. And he said, we're doing so great. Why do we need to get involved with this unification? And I said, well, what's going on with that? He said, well, and he told me the story about the meetings, and they were debating over the dates. So I got a little angry because all this stuff was going on, and I was completely excluded. So I went in, I told Vince McMahon and Tootsmont that I wanted to have a meeting with him. So we went to Vince McMahon had like 3 rooms in his office. We went in there, and I said, look, I understand that you guys are negotiating, but the dates are a problem, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I don't care who gets what dates. I said, but let me make one thing perfectly clear. I said, I'm going to talk to Frank Taney, and as much as I care about Frank, but I need those 2 Sundays that I'm giving up for my home, for my family. I have a wife and I have a kid. My mom and dad are getting old. I said, I'm going to take all 4 Sundays are mine. The other days, whether it's 26 or 27, depending on 30 or 31 day month, I says, I don't care how you guys split them up, whichever way you want. I don't care. I said, but I want to make it clear, because before you guys agree on who gets 15 days and who gets 16 days or whatever, then I'm going to be in the middle, because I'm not going to do it. So I said, so when you figure out who gets how many days, I said, remember, the 4 Sundays are off. Putzmond right there said, see, Vince, he said, see, I told you from the beginning, this is a stupid idea. He says, why do we want you? Well, Toots told me later, it was a bit of an ego thing for McMahon. He wanted his guy to be the one and only champion. So anyway, when these 4 days were eliminated, then it was problems, because now instead of working with 31 days or 30 days from now, they had to work with, say, 26, and Vince McMahon absolutely would not do for less than 17 days because of all these major arenas and all that. And so then the thing was put to a halt. I've been hearing all these stories, and I understand that you may have wrote about it too, Dave, was that Fez was demanding $100,000, and that a year later that the title was switched back. You know how stupid and ludicrous that is? First of all, why would McMahon consider going after 1 year to give Fez the title back? Why would he want to do that? Fez isn't the guy that they could use in New York. Fez wasn't, the few times they tried him, he never did anything over there. So Vince would never go for that. And $100,000? Gee whiz, after the deal fell through, who did he lose the title to? Gene Kiniski. Did he get $100,000? And did a year later, did Gene Kiniski give him the title back? That was such hogwash. I put the kibosh to the deal because of the days that they each one were demanding, when I told them that Sundays are mine, and that's it. And then they had less days to work with, and that's what broke that deal. Nothing else. Because Fez, unfortunately, he may have been great in the 30s and the 40s. I don't know his record. Obviously, he must have done very well as far as an attraction in that, because he was champion 6-7 times. But when it came to the 60s, Fez had his good days behind him, because I was in Toronto and I seen him when he came up there. In fact, that's another thing. He says that in an interview he did recently, he said that what a coup Frank pulled, because he got McMahon, because they were friends, to first give Rogers and then to give me, in other words, to wrestle Fez in Toronto. Well, that's insane. When I wrestled Fez in Toronto, I was working for Frank Tunney in Toronto. And Frank Tunney asked me, he says, look, Bruno, he said, I have to use Fez X amount of times because he's NWA champion. He says, and look at, he says, it's not been drawing. It's been disastrous every time he comes up here. He says, you're my top guy right now. I'd like to make a match with you and him, and we'll work something out where nobody gets hurt. He says, but he's the champ and blah, blah, blah. I said, fine, Frank. I said, that's fine. No problem. So that's what we did. It was like a double pin thing. I thought I won. He thought he won. Referee raised his hand. Fez was the winner. Fine. That was it. I mean, he said that Frank brought me from New York. If he had brought me from New York, I would have been the champion, because when I went back to New York, a short time thereafter, I got the belt from Rogers. Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's ludicrous. It's insane. I don't understand where this guy is telling these stories. There's just no truth to them whatsoever. This $100,000 demand, all due respect, he was in no position to demand anything, because he wasn't getting the job done anymore. He just wasn't drawing anything anywhere, and that's why they wanted to get rid of him. Now, they respected him. I'm not want to make it sound like get rid of him like he was an old shoe, but they just didn't want him in that spot anymore, because he just wasn't getting the job done. He just wasn't drawing anymore anywhere. And then he said that after he did that with Rogers and me, that really closed the doors for him in New York. Gee whiz, Fez hadn't been in New York since '51, because he drew the worst gate ever when he wrestled Rock in New York. I mean, I'm not putting the guy down, but my God, he tells these ridiculous tales. They're so outrageous, and there's no truth to them. And I don't understand it. If it's his mind, really, he believes that nonsense. He says there was even a bond that had been put up for Rogers and me in Toronto, and if we didn't go through with the match, we would have lost the money. What in the heck is he talking about? I never even heard of a bond.
There was one with Rogers, because it was the NWA title
with
bond.
Rogers, because the title was involved.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, but not with me.
I never heard with you.
Well, that's what
But
he told the Dan guy, Dan Rosinski, whatever his name is, from South Carolina. But he said,
one thing,
I came from New York to wrestle him. I was working for Frank Tunney when I wrestled him.
okay.
You didn't know that? You didn't know that, Dave?
I mean, you were just about to go to New York. I'm trying to remember the time frame, but this was early '63 when this was all going down.
Yeah, but at the time when I wrestled Fez, I had no clue what was going to happen in New York, because when Vince finally contacted me, I don't want no part of New York because of the bad memories that I had there. And then I made certain demands on him, and then finally, when everything was agreed upon, then when I went to New York, in a short time thereafter, wrestled Rogers for the title. But, that was after the Fez thing. Do you think that if I was going to be champion in New York, that I would even have agreed to wrestle Fez and lose a match? I wouldn't have even agreed to it, because that wouldn't have done me good for what was about to happen. But at the time when I wrestled Fez, I didn't even have a clue that I was going to be a champion in New York. Didn't have a clue at the time. This came up pretty fast when they started contact, because New York was dead. Rogers had literally taken the territory. Believe me, it was a disaster. McMahon was practically in bankruptcy. And Tootsmond and he were feuding a little bit, because McMahon said, look at the successes guys having in Canada, and he says, well, we had him here all the time, but you wanted to stick with this guy who's killed so many territories in the past, and now he's done this one in as well. So they were feuding over that, and finally, because McMahon and I weren't even talking, they went to a guy named Dave Freeman to contact me. I told Freeman, if McMahon wants to talk to me, let him call me. So finally McMahon did, and then when he wanted me to come back, he was offering me a guarantee week. I says, no, there's only one way I'll come back, and that's with, and the thing with Rogers. And that all came about quickly, but at the time I wrestled Fez, I didn't have a clue that was going to happen. And I repeat, I was working for Frank Tunney when I wrestled Fez, not Vince McMahon. So I don't know why he tells these things. They're outrageous. Anyway, that's it.
Okay, one thing I just wanted to ask you, and we got to run to a break real quick. In the thing in the mid-'60s, where they were going to unify the title and everything?
Yes.
To pacify him, and you know wrestling, I don't think it's inconceivable that they went to him and go, Lou, if you lose this match, we'll give it back to you a year later. Whether that year later would ever come or not is another story, but that's not exactly uncommon in wrestling either.
Okay, that's possible, but you know why I don't believe that? Because I think Mushnick respected Lou, and I don't think he would have given him a con job like that. I don't believe that.
No, you may very well be right. Yeah, you may very well be right on that. Wes, how are you today?
Hi guys, how's it going?
Real good.
Bruno, it's nice to talk to you. I wanted to ask you in regards to Stan Hansen and the neck injury. Did you think at that time that you would be able to come back, considering how medicine was at the time, from such a serious injury? And also, what do you think of Hansen's work? It was a little bit different at that time period, with the roughhouse style.
Yeah. Well, the doctors told me more than likely I would not come back. Okay, but I somehow I didn't believe that. I was always a fanatic with my training and everything else, and I know somebody might say, so what? But so what? The better condition you're in, the better shape you're in, the more desire, unless it's a situation to where you're paralyzed, which I became within a millimeter of being paralyzed from the neck down. But I didn't. So, no, they thought that the chances were against it, but I guess I fooled them because I did come back. As far as Stan Hansen, when I wrestled him back then, I thought I had some fairly good matches with Stan, but obviously he was a very young guy, and as time went on, he got better and better. But I thought he was a talented guy. He was raw. I think the time when I broke my neck in New York, I should have realized, because I was the veteran. I had been in the Garden I don't know how many times, where with him it was the first time. I think he was nervous. I think the match had gone on for about 15, 16 minutes at the time and very sweaty, and I don't know if the nerves maybe made him tired too. I really am not positive or anything. All I know is that I got dumped on my head, and but to stand from that time, I wrestled him many times after that. He certainly got better and better and better, and he became a very good talent.
Did you know immediately that the neck was broken, or did you think it was tweaked?
I didn't know. Everything went kind of crazy. At first, I felt like a bolt of lightning went through my body, and then I was like I couldn't feel my body. It was just such a weird thing and then I was told that I got up or he got me up or something, but I had no recollection of any of that or whatever took place after that. Next thing I know, I was in an ambulance going to a hospital.
You know, it's funny because, you know, I've seen that match, and, you know, after you break your neck, you come back and make a comeback, knock him out of the ring and everything like that.
I never seen that.
Yeah, you made a comeback, but I mean, when you went down and I mean, it was, you know, you got basically body slammed right on your head, and you could just see like it's like almost like a boxer knockout, and like for a couple of seconds there, it's like wow, you know, it's like how did they continue the match? But then I don't know what it was, but I mean, you made a comeback like. And then I guess, I don't know, I mean, but yeah, there was a comeback there.
Well, you know, Dave, I've never seen the match. That's amazing. How did you see that match?
It was taped on the MSG cable, and I know I saw it years and years ago.
No, I never saw it. All I know is that I found out later that the State Athletic Commissioner, and I forget his name, in New York, and he said to somebody, better, or to the doctor, or somebody at ringside, and he says, somebody better call an ambulance because this guy's really hurt. I was told this later, not at the time. But I really have no recollection of too much that happened afterwards. I don't know if it was instinct or what. I don't know.
No, when you came back about a couple months later for the Shea Stadium.
Yeah.
And we talked about this one before. I mean, it's interesting because I was looking and I think it was they were doing a retrospective of Stan's career, not your career, when he just retired in Japan. And they were showing like all of his famous matches, which included, you know, many of his matches in that era with you. And, you know, it was funny because, you know, you mentioned how, you know, they basically took you out of a hospital bed. I mean, that was probably the only photos I've ever seen of you from your entire career where you really were not, you know, you could see that you had not trained. You know, like right before the Shea match, yeah, because you were on your.
Oh,
on your
you mean when I came back for the match with him in Shea Stadium?
The Shea Stadium match, right? And it was like, wow, you know.
But Dave, you have to understand, I was in a hospital. I had this ridiculous thing on me, and Vince McMahon was calling every day saying that he had committed so many dollars with this Bob Arum for the Inoki, not for Inoki, but for Muhammad Ali. And he said, if I don't make this match with Stan Hansen, he says, we're going to be out of business. He said, we have to make this match. And I'd say, Vince, how can I do it? And I remember Dr. Louis Sivitri, so when the doctor, he got on the phone, he says to Vince McMahon, he says, how can you be talking about a match? He says, this guy is lucky that he's not paralyzed and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, McMahon would call daily, and the nurse would literally put the phone to my ear. And he said, Bruno, he says, we can do this match. We can do it in a way that your neck will be protected. You will not be touched. He says, but if we advertise that the match is going to take place, he says, it'll bail us out. He says, I'm telling you, if we don't make the match, he says, we could go under, he says, with the money that they had committed. So anyway, because it was closed circuit, you see, in the Northeast.
Yeah, right.
So anyway, as time went on, we made the match. Of course, I didn't train. My family was angry beyond the words that I can tell you. The Sivitri said, if you drop dead, he said, you brought it onto yourself, or if you get worse, he says, go. He was mad because he was a friend. He says, you'll have to go to a different. But I agreed to more or less because he made it so grave that would have been the end. And so I agreed. And of course I didn't train. I didn't do anything. I just went there, and we were just going to pull a 5-minute thing to where, you know, it was going to be strictly me doing a little bit of a number on him, and then to think very, very quickly and survive the whole ordeal and bail McMahon out of the situation he got himself into. And that's basically what happened.
So looking back, do you think that he was really in that grave of danger?
McMahon?
Yeah.
Financially.
You think he was being serious about that?
Well, I can only tell you what they sure as heck convinced me of. They made me believe that it was that grave. If it wasn't, I don't know. But at the time, they sure convinced me that it was that grave. But I don't know, Dave. Ryan, I think if I didn't believe it, I probably wouldn't have taken that chance.
Yeah.
Wes, anything else?
I just want to ask Bruno one more real quick. In terms of, even though they weren't gimmicks in terms of costumes, what do you think of Vince Sr. using, like ethnic characters, yourself for the Italians, Pedro Morales for Hispanics, Ivan Cole, in terms of, drawing in particular at Madison Square Garden?
You mean Vince McMahon Sr.?
Yes, sir.
What did I think of that? I never give that a heck of a lot of thought. I thought that, for example, if Ivan Koloff got over big, it was because of the way people perceived him, the way he wrestled and so forth. Because Killer Kowalski, he was Killer Kowalski. Don Leo Jonathan was Don Leo Jonathan. I mean, Big Bill Miller, he was American. He was Big Bill Miller. But yes, we did have the Tora Tanaka, the Japanese. He had the Russian, the German. That was something, I guess, that they had done for quite some time before I came into the business, and evidently they felt that there was a plus, something that meant a lot. I don't know, but I found, at least I think throughout my career, that I wrestled a lot of different people, and whether they were foreigners like that or whether they were American, like I say, the Bill Miller, the Jonathans, and these kind of people, I don't think it made any difference at all as far as the whole thing was how good was the individual. How good of a performer the individual was in getting himself over, not necessarily just because he was a Russian or a German or anything. Maybe after the war, it probably meant a lot more. I don't know, but I don't know. Maybe it meant more than I'm suggesting. I really don't know. I never really paid that much attention to that. I always looked at the guy's talent, and I always felt that I saw something in him, whether I thought that he had what it took to be an attraction or not. And I didn't look at necessarily at their the nationality part of it.
When you finally dropped the title for the last time with Billy Graham, what was your thoughts going into that? I mean, as far as the guy, if he was the right guy to drop it to, and pretty much as I gather, you'd kind of been wanting to drop it before then anyway, and it was kind of like, was it just the guy at the right time, or was it like when you saw Billy Graham because he was so colorful at the time, you thought, okay, this is the right guy to drop it to? No,
what I felt was that the first time I was more concerned that they got to get the right guy because, I was getting out, and as far as I was concerned, I was getting out for good. Not out of wrestling for good, but as far as that particular situation.
That's Koloff, right?
Yeah, and I was very disappointed when they didn't give him a chance. I mean, they got rid of him after only about 3 weeks, and I thought that was wrong. I thought that was ridiculous because I felt that he could have gone on for, a Koloff or a Graham, but they would have never lasted too long because that's just the nature of the business at that time. It's a lot easier to feed the villains to a good guy than it is to create good guys to keep feeding to a villain. It doesn't work. But with Billy, the second time around, I'll be honest with you, McMahon had made a deal with me. If I'd come back, it would only have to be for 1 year. He gave me the song and dance. I think just a year to get the right guy. It's going to take us, blah, blah, blah. And I went on. 1 year went to 2, 2 went to 3. Then I break my neck, and then the fourth year, I frankly, I still loved the business and all that stuff, but I just wanted out. I wasn't going to argue or question anybody that they got. I just wanted out. And I'm nothing against Billy, now, don't misunderstand. But I'm just saying I didn't give any thought or say, no, he's the right guy, he's the wrong guy. I just didn't care. I just wanted out, I just wanted out of that situation.
Okay, let's go to Mike in Florida. Mike, what's going on?
Hi, Bruno. It's a complete honor. I'm originally from Pittsburgh.
Oh.
And grew up in Squirrel Hill.
All righty.
There were two heroes in my life growing up in Pittsburgh. One was Roberto Clemente, and the other was Bruno Sammartino.
Well, thank you. I knew Roberto pretty well, but I thank you very much.
I grew up watching championship wrestling with your good friend Bill Cardille.
Oh, yes.
On WIIC, and I was there the night that Tony Marino dropped the mask as a little kid. I was thinking about what happened. Tony dropped the mask, and he came out in his white outfit, in his white trunks, and I actually used to box for Al Vogler in Pittsburgh and Wilkinsburg, and I happened to be training one day, and here comes Joey Cimino sitting at ringside.
Oh, yeah.
And I froze. And Bruno, I just, before the people were chanting Rock and Hogan, Bruno Sammartino made professional wrestling what it is today. And guys,
hey, don't blame me for it.
Bruno. No, I mean, Bruno was, I've met you as a little kid at the Dapper Dans.
Oh, yeah.
And you were always the same as the persona that everybody saw on TV. And also, I want to thank you because I was one of those people that had written you.
Oh?
And I have a book. It's and if you want to know, it's Meiselman's sports address book.
Huh.
Okay, I paid about $39 for it, and your address is in there.
Ah, is that right?
That's where it's from.
Yeah, it's Meiselman Sports Address, and I wrote to Bruno, and I sent Bruno a picture that I had since I was 10 years old. I think my father had taken me to every match with the Bobby Hurricane Hunt and the Carnegie Cup and Johnny DeFazio and Dominic. It's just a complete honor, and guys, you've done your show a complete service. This is a hero to anybody in Pittsburgh, and Bruno, we just love you.
Well,
God
thank
bless
you very much. I appreciate
you,
the kind words. Thank you.
And I'm just going to leave it at that because it's just a complete honor. My wife was going to go for a walk with me, and I said, no, I'm waiting to talk to Bruno.
Oh, thank you.
But thank you very much, and take care of yourself, and it's an honor.
Thank you. Thank you
sir.
again.
Okay, we'll try to get one last caller in. John in Florida. John, what's going on?
Bruno, how you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
Listen, I got a question that's been bothering me.
Okay.
Okay, a lot of people trash Hulk Hogan, and I want to know, is it true why they trash him is because of the money he's made? He set an indoor attendance record which no wrestler could ever break again.
It's already been broken. True? It's already been broken.
Who broke it?
Inoki and Flair broke it.
That's in Japan. I mean, here in the States.
Well, she was in Korea, but if you got a big enough building, somebody else could break it. They happen to wrestle in the biggest building, that's all.
You're talking about the gate like at the Silver Dome and that?
He's talking about the Silver Dome, I'm sure.
Yeah, but keep in mind, now wait a minute, in all fairness, I'm not going to give him all the credit for that. Keep in mind, that was WrestleMania, and they built WrestleMania to be this spectacular thing nationwide. To be perfectly honest with you, if he was such a hot item, how come then I was still with the WWF as a commentator when they went back to that big stadium in Michigan, and he wrestled I forget who, and they did as little as 9,000 people. How do you go from supposedly 90,000 to 9,000? Now, so you see, when you have a spectacular thing like that, like WrestleMania, it's they have the movie stars and outside athletes, and they make such a spectacle of it that you can't just give the credit and say he alone was responsible for that. Hey, I consider my match with Zbyszko with 46,000 people in Shea Stadium bigger than that for the simple reason that it was strictly a local show, advertised strictly for New York and no place else. And it was just a local show, and that's it. And we did that many people. And keep in mind the Silver Dome, and Dave would know better than me whether this is true or not, but this is what I was told time and again, that 90,000 they keep talking about, that 30,000 of those were actually giveaways. Is that true, Dave?
Not quite that many, but I think the paid was about 70. Was it 74? 74,
I think it was 74 paid and like 78 in the building or something.
Yeah.
Okay, Bruno.
Yeah.
Is it also true that people are jealous because he was getting percentages of pay-per-views? Every appearance on Nitro, he was making money. Every appearance on Thunder.
Well, I don't know what you mean, who they are, because I never knew what kind of money he was making.
All the wrestlers, that's who they are. All the wrestlers that trash him today, he's not a nice guy. I went to his house in Clearwater. He treated me like a king. I got pictures of me at his house in his Viper. He doesn't invite just strangers to his house.
Well,
yes, he does.
Well, I don't know what to tell you. All I know is that as a wrestler, I resented the fact of the when you're talking about to the kids and the prayers and the thing, and the guy is a big drug user, like with the steroids and all that kind of crap. I felt that he was. I just felt that there was a lot of wrong that going on at Third with all the different things that they were doing, drugs of all kinds, and I just felt that I needed to see that in my business, and I felt that a guy like him, being that he was on top, if anything, he should have been a spokesman to keep the business clean and to keep a lot of that stuff out instead of being one of the participants.
We're going to go to Bob in Rhode Island. We're going to get one last caller in. Bob, what's going on?
Hi, Bruno. Dave, great show. Brian, you too. Bruno, I just want to thank you for all the shows that you put on in the 70s in Providence and in Boston. I mean, you were the greatest.
I can hardly hear you. I'm sorry about that. But what you're saying, that you saw me in Providence? Is that what you
Yeah, I wanted to thank you for all the shows that you put on in Providence and in Boston in the 70s. I never missed any of them.
Oh, thank you.
And you truly are the greatest. I have two quick questions, though. One, are you planning on writing a book?
No.
You're not? Come on.
Well, you know what? These guys today can write books because wrestling, gets a lot of notoriety now with media, so that they can get publishers and that. I did one book in 1990, and the local people here, they didn't even have the ability to put it nationwide. It was more local than anything else. I wouldn't go through that again. I don't think so.
And just one other thing. Is it true that Rogers had a heart attack before you beat him with the 48?
Well, I wish I had time. I don't think Dave will tell you at the time, because that's another thing I wanted to clear up. Absolutely not, and I could tell you, I could clarify that very, very well, but I don't think that Dave has got the time right now. But some other time, that's another point that I like to clear up, because believe me, I know the whole story, and never. The only time he had heart trouble was when he had a bypass surgery, and at the time he was close to 70 years of age, if not 70 years of age. I can tell you how it all started, how the whole thing came about, in Pittsburgh, how Paul Sullivan was the guy that made him go to hospital because they suspended his license when he claimed he had chest pains, and after spending a week in the hospital, his license was taken completely away from everywhere, and he was given a complete and total clean bill of health. The way he got the chest pains was he came to Pittsburgh, he was on top, he came in with a big cigar, with his shoes were struck, but when he looked out at the arena, half hour before the show started, there were like 800 people, the building goes about 19,000, and he said, I'm not going to wrestle in an empty arena, so he told the doctor that he had some chest pains. When the doctor heard that, he says, I can't let you wrestle, but he reported to Paul Sullivan, who was a very strict athletic commission, and Paul Sullivan put out the word that this guy was having these problems, and until it was resolved, that he was suspended, license all over. And that's when he got very angry, Rogers, because he thought he was just going to get out of that show that night, but then all this came up, and then McMahon put him in this hospital in Washington, D.C., where he stayed for, I don't remember how many days, but I remember the time where they put him through every imaginable test there was, and he got a clean bill of health, and then he came out, and then the license was reissued to him, and he continued his career. Later on, after he lost to me, he said that they took him in a ring and practically in a stretcher, because 2 weeks before he had a heart attack, and 2 weeks before I wrestled him on TV, Washington, D.C., because my opponent was supposed to show up, and he was going to teach me a lesson, and he came in the ring. We wrestled on TV, which was a bigger build-up for the big match in Madison Square Garden. It was all a lie. People can believe what they want to believe, but I know exactly what happened, and he never had a heart attack. If he did have a heart attack, it was when he was 70 years old, because they had to do a bypass surgery on him.
You're the greatest.
It's funny if you look back at 1962-63 and Buddy Rogers as NWA champion, and then with WWF champion.
Yeah.
You will see a lot of similarities in Buddy Rogers and Shawn Michaels, both in the ring and out of the ring.
Is that right?
Yeah, Shawn was really good at not dropping. Shawn was really good at getting hurt before his title match when he was supposed to lose too. Very convenient.
Well, Rogers didn't like to wrestle before in an empty arena, and at the end of his career, he was doing a lot of it because New York had really gone down the tubes.
Anyway, Bruno, I want to thank you very much for doing the show.
Hey, I enjoyed it, guys.
I enjoyed it too, and we got to get you back. We got a lot of feedback on it tonight, and there's a lot more stories I'm sure that we didn't even touch that we can still talk about. So
anytime, Dave, just let me know, and I'll be your guest. And sorry if I took too much time in clearing that one point, but it kind of bothered me, and I wanted to bring it out. But the next time, we'll do it all yours and all your callers, and I will not interject with any other stories.
Okay, great. No, that's the best part of the show. Don't kid yourself.
We like the long rants.
We love the stories.
Oh, well.
Anyway, we will be back here tomorrow. We're going to have, now I'm pulling a blank. Who do we have tomorrow, Al?
Crowbar.
We got Chris Ford, Crowbar. That's right. I've been looking forward to the show as well. So anyway, we'll see you tomorrow at 5.